Letter spacing is something many people don't talk about, or let's say unknown about its importance. But just like line height, letter spacing is also crucial components of typography. While line height determines the vertical space between lines of text, letter space determines the horizontal aspect, which means the space between individual letters. When it comes to letter spacing, the default setting in every browser is 0, unlike line height, which is set 120% by default in browsers. However, it's essential to adjust letter spacing just like line height based on the specific font and font size you are using. In this video, you'll learn how a small tweak to letter spacing can significantly enhance your design. Number 1. Customize letter spacing for every font. Every fonts have their own features. Some look good with no letter spacing, while some look good when we do some letter spacing treatments. So I've used four different types of font and same font size. So for the first one, I've used Manrope font with 16 pixel font size and line height is 150%. While the letter spacing is 0, this looks good even if I've not done any treatment in the letter spacing. However, in the case of second font, which is Inclusive Sans, here I need to do some letter spacing adjustment to make it look more professional or look good. The font size is same, which is 16 pixel, and I adjusted the line height to 140% and letter spacing to -2 to make it look good. In the third one, I've used serif font. So as mentioned earlier, I added some line height to serif fonts because serif font need more line height in compared to sans fonts. And there's no letter spacing at all, and it still look good. And the last one is Work Sans font. So I have used same font size and line height, and for this I've used -3% letter spacing. So basically, every font needs a separate letter spacing treatment. Number 2, larger the font sizes, the tighter the letter spacing. When the font size increases, the space between each letters also increase proportionately. So in the case of larger fonts, it does not look good when there are too much space between the letters. So that's why we need to fix letter spacing in the larger fonts. Here, what we need to do is the letter spacing is currently 0. We can give a negative letter spacing to make it look more balanced. So right now I just gave 4% letter spacing. Now this looks more balanced and it's not disconnected as it was before. So the thumb rule, larger the font size, lesser the letter spacing, just like line height. Larger the font size, less the line height. Larger the font size, less the letter spacing as well. Number 3, the lighter the font weight, the less the letter spacing. Another case is when the font weight decreases, the letter spacing need to decrease as well. Here, I've used the same font, but I've used like a lighter weight. On the top, it's semi-bold. Here, it's light. So let me just scroll up. Now, even if I'm using -4, it still look bit disconnected in compare to above because our letter font weight has decreased to light. So lighter the font weight, the lesser letter spacing needs to be. So it was 4, I can do it like -6. Yeah, so this look more balanced. So basically, if the font is bolder, we can increase the letter spacing. If the font is lighter, we can decrease the letter spacing. Number 4, use wide letter spacing only with all caps. In this word, I have used wider letter spacing and each character looks extremely disconnected. Here, you can see that I've used 20% letter spacing, making each character look completely disconnected. However, by keeping the same letter spacing and switching to all caps, the text now appear much more balanced. Now that we have covered the important aspect of letter spacing, Let's go back to our previous design and see how I have applied letter spacing in different components. In this design, I have done letter spacing treatment wherever required. For example, so here I didn't give any letter spacing, it's 0, either here. However, in this part, the letter spacing was important. So I've used this title and given the letter spacing of 20%. And for the larger heading, I've given -4 as a letter spacing. Down here, I've used 30 pixel font size and given -1% letter spacing. And for the 20 pixel font size mangrove font, there's no letter spacing. So this is how we have to give letter spacing. Like for different cases, we'll have to give different letter spacing. So letter spacing is also case by case, depending on the font size, and font weight. One important concept that often confuses people when discussing letter spacing is kerning. Letter spacing is also called tracking. Letter spacing or tracking applies uniform space between all characters in a word or a block of text, while kerning adjusts the space between individual letters. Let me explain to you with real examples here. In this screen, you can see the word kerning. When we give the letter spacing to this word, this one single word, you can see the spacing between R and N is quite tighter in compared to N, I, N, and these spacing. And in the case of web design, we normally do not give letter spacing to each character, which is technically possible, but it's not really needed to fix each and every details in the case of web design because we are using a larger paragraph or larger text. But when it comes to logo, it's very important to fix these small details. For example, in the case of logo, we have to do it each letters by letter. So I have separately typed all the characters and we have to fix manually here. Similarly, let's say in the case of serif font, if I reduce this letter spacing, these are overlap, but these are too far. So it's really not possible to reduce, to separate this. So what we need to do is we have to do it individually like this. For website, fine-tuning letter spacing in individual character is not something we need to do since letter spacing applies to entire text block. However, when it comes to logo design, fixing the spacing between each letter is very important. A logo is often just one or two words, and this attention to detail can transform a good logo into a great logo. That's why big companies spend thousands of dollars refining their logo. Often the only change they make is subtle adjustment to kerning. So, letter spacing is just as important as line height, and small adjustment can make a big difference in elevating your design. I hope this video helped you understand the importance of letter spacing in web design. Thank you for watching. If you are interested in learning more about typography, be sure to subscribe and check out my other videos where I share more tips and tricks about typography.